Hi friends, my name is Emily and welcome to day 1 of the Chamber of Secrets Lumos reading vlog. This should be episode 5. Right now it is January 3rd. I took a week off work and I worked really hard on the Lumos content for January. Some of it is happening right now. So alongside Chamber of Secrets, I am reading 2 other texts. The post went live, or is scheduled to go live for my patrons February 10th, with a PDF of The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell. I'm going to be reading the nurse's story and looking at Gothic elements in Chamber of Secrets. And then I am also going to be looking for examples of magical prejudice and racial purity, like obsession with race. And I'm also reading Half-Breed by Maria Campbell, which is a text that I've read before. It is a biography, and it is about a Canadian Métis woman. I think the idea of indigeneity and the ways that, I can only speak to the Canadian context, but the ways that the Canadian government over the years has systematically worked to eradicate indigeneity with things like residential schools and denying status to certain people. Pretty shitty, and I feel like it makes an interesting parallel to the wizard blood purity that is happening. So those are the 2 things that I am looking for in this text. Oh, what fun. So I'm going to start reading and I'll check in with you guys in a little bit. Let's talk about how sad this is. On page 5, quote, "But now the school year was over and he was back with the Dursleys for the summer, back to being treated like a dog that had rolled in something smelly. The Dursleys hadn't even remembered that today happened to be Harry's 12th birthday. Of course, his hopes hadn't been high. They'd never given him a proper present, let alone a cake. But to ignore it completely... At that moment, Uncle Vernon cleared his throat importantly and said, 'Now, as we all know, today is a very important day.' Harry looked up, hardly daring to believe it. 'This could well be the day I make the biggest deal of my career,' said Uncle Vernon. Harry went back to his toast. Of course, he thought bitterly, Uncle Vernon was talking about the stupid dinner party. How sad is it that they neglect Harry to such a degree, right? Like, it's just heartbreaking. The other thing that I am deeply enraged about is that every time a part of Dudley is described, it is described as fat. His fat arm, his fat face, his fat leg, his fat bottom. There are literally no other words. And like they're within a 4-page span of each other. Page 6, 8, 9, 10. Every time a part of Dudley's body is mentioned, it is fat. So I just made the note that the Weasleys care for Harry like proper adults. So already Harry made this comment about how he feels like everyone in the Weasley house likes him. Like he doesn't feel like he's unwanted or like this burden. And like Mrs. Weasley is fussing over him and making sure that he has food, and Mr. Weasley wants to talk to him and ask him about Muggle things. There are teachers that care about Harry, and like Hagrid kind of cares about Harry, but like it's different than actually being in a home and having adults take an interest in him, and like how lacking that is for Harry is devastating, like absolutely devastating. I love and deeply appreciate the moments where we're reminded of just how young Harry and Ron are. So they've just arrived at the school, they've just been beaten up by the Whomping Willow, and like there are so many like flaws in their logic, right? Like when the barrier doesn't let them through, they could have, as McGonagall suggested, sent an owl to Hogwarts. Hedwig was there. They could have just gone back to the car because presumably Mr. and Mrs. Weasley would have needed to return to the car at some point, and they're adult wizards, and, you know, they can get around a barrier, and even if they couldn't, they'd have to end up back there eventually. So they don't show up at school because the barrier is broken. Like, obviously that's not their fault. This moment where they're like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. It didn't even occur to me to do like so many logical things between the problem and the action that we took, or the problem and a reasonable solution. And it's it's nice. It's nice to see them behave like actual children, I guess. Good morning. So it is 6:30-ish in the morning. I have the day off today because this weekend I am in all weekend doing inventory at work for Indigo. So, this morning I listened to the young adult podcast, Hazel and Katniss and Harry and Star. They did their February forecast, and there are 3 books that they mentioned, that sound phenomenal, and I added them to an Amazon idea list. One day, if I ever finish the books that I own and haven't read, I can return to these idea lists. That is my strategy. Not impulse buying, making idea lists. I have just gotten to the bit where we see Lockhart's first lesson. It's the freshly caught Cornish pixies. He doesn't teach them anything. No spells, no way to deal with pixies or deal with being attacked. And he just says, right then, let's see what you make of them. And he opens the cage, and it was pandemonium. And that's on page 107 of this book. So Lockhart has no lesson plan. He hasn't done this to teach the students anything. Like, he has no learning objectives, no way to test the students on what they're learning, right? It's just, here is a thing, deal with it. This almost feels like more of a Care of Magical Creatures lesson than anything, because pixies aren't dark creatures. Okay, fine. Hire someone incompetent to teach first years because reasons. I don't know, maybe you want to develop Lockhart as a teacher, or maybe Dumbledore wants to prove that Lockhart is incompetent by hiring him and seeing firsthand. But he teaches all 7 years, so students in their 7th year at Hogwarts are getting the same shit education. There's no lesson plan, clearly. The students who are going into their owls or their newts that have to do like this standardized testing, how are they going to pass? Like, there isn't another teacher. No one looks in on these teachers' lessons plans. Questioning the institutional structure at Hogwarts is probably not something you're meant to do when you're like 12 or like a child reader, whoever the intended reader of this is. It's definitely not something that I thought about when I read this book for the first time when I was 6. But like, reading this as an adult, I am so annoyed with Lockhart, and in turn deeply frustrated with Dumbledore as like the head of a school, as an educator. Like, this is absolute bullshit. All right, so we keep getting hints about Ginny doing weird things, like wandering the grounds by herself, being very isolated, looking a little off, and then her being very disturbed by Mrs. Norris. So I feel like she would actually be a more interesting narrative perspective, and if this ever gets remade, if this gets picked up as like a high-end HBO show, I would love to see entire episodes from her perspective rather than Harry Potter's perspective, where she is losing track of time, has huge gaps in her memory, and like can't figure out where she comes to consciousness, how she got there, right? Like, I think it would be so fascinating to see more from her perspective, and like the toll that must be taking on her mental health. Hello, good afternoon. What day is today? Today is February 5th. I went to work this morning. I did a bunch of running around, bunch of errands after work. I made Brussels sprout tacos for lunch. It's beautiful what sleep does toward, like, in regards to making you function like a human. I have spent a full, like, 88 minutes, that's how long I was listening to a podcast, looking for a very expensive, like, cruelty-free, cruelty-free, vegan, hypoallergenic concealer that I purchased and used once, and I can remember it being on the bathroom counter, and now it is gone. It is gone forever. I have torn through, like, every drawer, every cupboard. I looked through garbage cans in case, like, I did the thing where I put it on and then was like, I'm just going to throw this away. I cannot find it. So after 88 minutes of looking, if I pay myself minimum wage for that looking, I have worked the cost of the concealer to find it, and so now can buy another one. I'm going to be reading Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. I'm going to be doing some e-reading. I do not like e-reading, but I did not want to pay $60 for the physical copy of this book. Keeping track of my expenses for Lumos. Like, this comes out of the patron funds opposed to like my personal funds, if that makes sense. So that patron is funding like anything that I buy for research for this series. And so I bought a book on Kindle because, again, this is an academic text. It fucking sucks doing academic quality research without access to an academic library. And it makes me so aware of how, like, isolated scholarship is, in that all of this really great work is being done, like a lot of really interesting work, and some of it is like unnecessarily theoretical and like high language for the sake of bullshittery, but like a lot of it is really accessible and really interesting and deals with popular texts because folks are studying what the masses are reading. Like, they want to see how these texts are being, or what these texts are saying to the masses, right? So like there's a lot of good critical scholarship on really popular texts that are totally inaccessible once you don't have a university login. But no one individual can pay for access to these things, and a lot of them don't even have the option of paying. Like, I hit a journal article today that sounded fascinating, and it was about wizards wearing robes and high heels. It's looking at masculinity in the Harry Potter universe, and it's not even behind a paywall. Like, I can't even pay for it. It's behind, like, you have to log in with your university email. It has to be an accredited university that they recognize, that your university pays for access to that journal, right? And like, I don't even have the option of paying out of pocket for it, which I, depending on the cost, might do for this series, because I'm keeping track of my expenses and like making sure that that is like patron funds. It's mind-boggling how inaccessible this is. My point being that I picked up a book, this was published 2016, so still after I did my MA thesis, called Wizards vs. Muggles, Essays on Identity and the Harry Potter Universe, and it's edited together by Christopher E. Bell. So it's recent. A lot of Harry Potter scholarship is like pre-Goblet of Fire, which is annoying. It was so annoying when I was doing my MA thesis and like you couldn't find anything dealing with the text beyond Goblet of Fire. But this has articles or essays like the anti-racist white hero premises, whiteness in the Harry Potter series, prisoner of gender, masculinity in the Harry Potter books, the HIV metaphor, J.K. Rowling's werewolf and its transformative potential. Like, there's just so many good things in here, and like, this text would probably interest a lot of folks. I don't know how accessible a lot of the writing is because I haven't started reading it, but that this text is priced at like $67 paperback. That's standard for like an academic book, and I have unfortunately paid for some of those during my MA thesis. I justified the purchasing of them. Most people won't pay almost $70 for a paperback book, right? And even the Kindle book was pretty expensive. So I am excited to read these. I'm specifically interested in, not your introduction, Christopher. Actually, this might be pretty good. The anti-racist white hero premise, whiteness in the Harry Potter series, in regards to Chamber of Secrets, because I think that like pure blood thing very easily links to race, but then also the gender, because I am working on meeting up with a friend who is going to discuss masculinity in Goblet of Fire. I think there's a lot going on with masculinity in Goblet of Fire. So he is looking for, like, he's read the book. I haven't read the book yet. I mean, I've read the book before, but I haven't reread it recently. So I'm going to have to jump a little bit around in the series in order to arrange these interviews. I'm excited. I'm excited about pulling this together. So I'm going to read Prisoner of Gender, Masculinity in the Harry Potter books. So where are we at in Chamber of Secrets? This is supposed to be a Chamber of Secrets reading vlog. Oh, Lockhart has just removed all the bones from Harry's arm. That's where we're at. Lockhart is so frustratingly incompetent. It is, like, it's not even funny as, like, an adult. I know I found him funny as a kid. Like, I remember Lockhart, like, thinking Lockhart was hilarious. Reading him as an adult, I am so frustrated with him. I think it's because as an adult, you've met people like this who are like, you're pretty sure are lying just to, like, one up people in conversation. And you just want to be like, fuck you. Like, you did not fight a bear. Like, I'm 99% sure you did not fight a bear this summer while you were tree planting. You're not dead, for one. I don't know many people who survive bear attacks if you were genuinely attacked by a bear. Somebody is going to go in the comments and be like, I was attacked by a bear and I survived. It's possible. I mean, Archie on Riverdale, he fought a bear for some very manly chest scars, but we know that Riverdale isn't rooted in reality. So, like, Lockhart just reminds me of those very frustrating humans that I have now encountered. Also, isn't Dobby just adorable? Like, he is so fucking cute. One of my favorite characters. I wore mismatched socks for years as a reference to Dobby. Are you ready for an update you didn't ask for? Remember the concealer? And as a last resort, I texted my father. Did you, by any chance, borrow my concealer? And he says, guilty. It is it is February 6th, Thursday, I think? Wednesday? I don't know, I started the week on the wrong day in my little, like, pill box, and now I have no idea what day it is. Very easily fixed by moving the medications, but did I do that? No. So I am going to plug away at that. I managed to find a copy of Men in Cloaks and High-Heeled Boots, Men Wielding Pink Umbrellas, Witchy Masculinities in the Harry Potter Novels by Annette Wanamaker. So this was something that was behind a paywall, and then I followed, like, the Google Scholar links, and somewhere farther down, it wasn't behind a paywall, and I am not asking any questions. I'm super jazzed for this. Like, so jazzed. We're gonna start with some Chamber of Secrets. It's Dueling Club. So we're gonna watch Harry talk to snakes. Whew, I'm excited to watch this movie too. Like, it's been a long time. So something worth mentioning is word choice when it comes to describing characters' bodies. So I'm thinking specifically, Millicent Bulstrode is a Slytherin girl who reminded Harry of a picture he'd seen in Holidays with Hags. She was large and square, and her heavy jaw jutted aggressively. How do I want to say this? Like, she is large and square. And I feel like Celadry of Mindolin and Tamora Pierce's Protector of the Small series could also be described as large and square, right? Like, she's, I don't know, probably around 6 feet tall by the end of the quartet, and she's athletic, but I don't think Tamora Pierce would ever describe her lead female character as square, right? And, like, there's nothing wrong about being tall and, like, of a more athletic build, but it's specifically the word choice and the ways that the text describes certain bodies that links them to badness or ugliness or evil, and, like, it's the not socially normative appearances. Is that a sentence? Is that what I want to say? It's folks who don't fit the description of, like, normative beauty standards, right? They don't meet normative beauty standards that are described in ways that link them with evil, or at least the language would indicate that. Like, I think Neville is maybe described as, like, plump and awkward, not square. There's some interesting word choice happening in here that is, I haven't, like, fully thought through it, but it's this is one of those moments of critical thinking. It's sitting wrong with me that, like, this certain word choice about children's bodies signifies their goodness or their evilness. I can't quite articulate it right at this moment, but I've made a note of it in the text. Something to think about, something to pay attention to as we meet characters. How are their bodies being represented in terms of what we know about them as a human and like their morals. Today is February 7th, Friday. I am on one of the last little legs of the book right before they go into the Chamber of Secrets. And I just hit the part where Ginny Weasley is about to confess to Harry and Ron when Percy comes up and Ginny scuttles away, and Percy implies that Ginny witnessed him doing something. And he made her swear not to tell anyone. He says, well, if you must know, Ginny, walked in on me the other day when I was... Well, never mind. The point is she spotted me doing something, and I asked her not to mention it to anyone. So, I feel like as an adult reader, she walked in on something super sexual. Like, I'm picturing Percy, like, handcuffed to something, stripped naked, like, ball gag, caught in the act of something, like, deeply sexual based on his reaction. And, like, I'm pretty sure that Ginny later tells us that she walked in on Percy kissing. But, like, why would Percy be embarrassed that he was kissing somebody? Like, clearly, whatever he was doing was, like, super graphically sexual. And it's just there in the text. Because I don't think, like, 16-year-olds are embarrassed that they kiss girls, generally, or boys. That they kiss other people. I don't think 16-year-olds are generally embarrassed that they kiss other people. I'm just envisioning Percy in, like, the most compromised sexual position somewhere in Hogwarts, and Ginny just walks in on it and is like, I don't know what's happening! They must be kissing! Hogwarts needs sex education. So I just finished Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, concluding the end of this vlog. Can I just point out something about the difference between the original covers and the new covers? Has anyone noticed it? The original covers, fun hijinks, opens the novel, how they get to Hogwarts. The new novels spoil the ending. We have the basilisk with his eye poked out, and Fawkes the Phoenix, the sword of Gryffindor. For before we even open it, we learn that Harry can talk to snakes, and oh boy, there's a giant snake on the cover. Gee, I wonder what's in the Chamber of Secrets. I wonder how Harry deals with what's in the Chamber of Secrets. The covers seem to spoil the ending of the books, which I think is interesting because I know that I know of at least one human who is following along, reading for the first time with this series. For all new readers of the Harry Potter books, these new covers almost assume that you know what you're getting into, that you already know the outcome of the series in a way that, like, the first books did not. My goodness, like, Chamber of Secrets, I think, is one of my favorites. I feel like I mentioned it in the first reading vlog that it was like 150 pages before we even get to Hogwarts, before we even get to the magic, which was important, but whatever. And I mean, like, there was a little bit of preamble too, but, like, we get into, like, the Burrow and the magic a lot quicker. And I know that's the nature of being a second book in a series, but I just think this one is, like, a well-crafted, fun, fantasy, gothic-inspired, standalone read. Like, I feel like you could read this in isolation. The first three, really, you could read in isolation. All three really function as, like, contained narratives, I think. There's, like, a contained mystery within each one. And yes, it's building on to the larger plot. Also, have to say, not going to spoil anything, but on the reread, some of the things in here will blow your mind. Like, by the time you get to the end of the series and come back to this, your mind will be blown. I have to say that the last time I reread these, I was rereading them specifically to look at the characterization of Hermione. I wasn't looking at these things more generally. And so, like, there are some beautiful gems, some beautiful Easter eggs that reward the rereader. So like even once you get through the series, it is 100% worth it to read it again. I loved this experience. It's been a little all over the place in terms of this vlog just because of all of the things that I have been working on. I'm so enjoying this reread project. Best homework I could have assigned myself, right? Would love to hear your thoughts on Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets in the comments down below. The next time I see you, we will be talking about the Gothic and The Old Nurse's Story by Elizabeth Gaskell. The PDF of the story will be going live to patrons on February 10th. Otherwise, the story is in public domain if you want to track down a copy for yourself. It is the support of patrons who help cover the cost of producing this series. Thank you, patrons. And if you want to support the channel, you want to support these videos, the links to the Patreon page are on the screen and in the description box down below. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy reading. Bye!